Hey, everybody, and welcome to Comics and Cinema. I'm your host, Alex Klein, and we have quite the show for everybody today. We are talking about the hot new film, The Woman King, starring Viola Davis. And in order to break down this episode, I have two very special guests, one of which is dealing with some connectivity issues. The entire system apparently needed to be rebooted just a few minutes before the show started, but I can't blame him because my entire internet went out today for like 5 hours. So it's been a very strange electronics day, is all I'll say. So we will welcome our other guest, which is a great friend of the show, Maya. Maya, welcome to Comics and Cinema.
Hi, thanks for having me, even though I asked you to be on the show.
Hey, anytime we can get you on the show is always a treat. So I'm glad. Sometimes I get so focused. Plus, as you guys know, I've been incredibly busy this month. My entire family is getting married this year, and so I've had 2 bachelor parties in the last 3 weeks. And I'm not a crazy partier, so it's been very interesting, but it has left me very tired. So on these last few episodes, I've just been kind of, okay, I'm just going to do it, get it done real quick, and go back to sleep. So I do appreciate you kind of reminding and calling it out. And I'm glad too, because like I said, this other guest who just is here and I'm pulling in as well, Rob got to see it as well. So Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Good. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. We were just saying, just had to deal with some technical difficulties. So we're here and we're good. So we are talking The Woman King, again, just released in theaters last week. I got to see it last night in Dolby. Maya and Robert, I think both of you guys got to see it over the weekend. Is that right?
Yeah.
In a very, very raggedy theater, but the movie was
Yeah, it's interesting. Different theater situation in the Pacific Northwest, I imagine.
Yeah, very different. So,
well, Maya, we'll start with you up at the top. Overall thoughts of the film?
I absolutely adored this film. Granted, I did not have the historical context beforehand. I didn't do a lot of research before I saw. I just remember seeing the trailer. I'm like, oh, it's Viola Davis, Lashana Lynch. Of course, I'm going to see it. So when I say that this movie just moved me in so many different ways, I thought it was just amazing. And I just think about like the first time I saw like Gladiator or like movies like that, like those really heavy combat movies. And like for them to like be able to have that and more from like a representation level and also just like early historical level, I think was really great. And it translated well on screen. And a lot of women that I absolutely adore. And then this movie even opened up the door to more like women actors, actresses that I love. So lots of great things here.
Nice. Awesome. And I will say, we will be talking spoilers about this movie. There really aren't any. It's a historical picture. So anything you need to know, you can just go look up online as well. Robert, overall thoughts of the film?
Same thoughts as Maya. Thought about Gladiator, all like the visceral action and everything. It was really dope. Like from the jump, as soon as the movie starts, it lets you know right off the bat, like these women ain't playing. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. For me, and that's only because I recently watched it last week, The Northman again. It reminded me a lot of that too. Very similar in terms of just people wrecking shop. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. The movie, it kind of opens up immediately with a fight. There really, at least the way that I saw it, it's kind of like there were 3 big fights. There was the beginning fight at the very beginning, which I think is fantastic for kind of establishing how powerful these women are. And then you've got that middle fight, which is like this is what we've all been waiting for fight, which was awesome too. And then there's that final fight when they have to go back and rescue a couple people, which played out just as great too. The movie actually starts out too, which I thought was really interesting. Started out with kind of like a little opening crawl, and was explaining that this takes place during the early 1800s. I think they said it's 1823. So a lot of really interesting history here that for me, I don't know a lot about that time period outside of the US, right? I was like in my head trying to line it up with, okay, when was the Civil War? And so this took place like 40 years before the Civil War. So the big sort of backdrop of this film is slavery. which was an interesting take because, again, this was something that I hadn't learned much about. I didn't see. I knew it was something that happened where a lot of these African countries would kind of sell off either their own people or people that they'd captured or, had a victory over in war, and would sell them to slavers, trade it for, I think I looked on Wikipedia, was saying, like alcohol and other food supplies. It's just a wild time too. And I wanted to get you guys' opinions on that because I just kept thinking like, what it's kind of like not a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it was just so strange how the European culture was able to convince these countries that their own people were worthless. And there was even a line in the movie towards the end when King Gezo was saying, basically the biggest trick that they pulled was making us think that we could put a price on our head, right? That like, that people were actually worth an amount of money. And so Maya, we'll start with you. What did you make of that entire kind of theme in the movie?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. Again, it was also a new perspective for me. I haven't seen any story told around like the slave trade from like an African like royalty, like basically whoever's like running the shots on that end, that perspective. But I think it was interesting because really what they were doing was the enemies of that specific tribe, like the Dahomey, it was like their enemies are the ones that, like the people that they had like imprisoned, those are the ones that they were basically selling to the slave trades, selling them to like the white colonizers. So I thought that was interesting because it's like, man, it's a point of time where it's like this community, the first time they have to be like, okay, us as a people, meaning Black people, because before that, like when the white man's not in the equation, it's just friend, enemy. This like the idea of race, skin color probably didn't even come into factor. So, for them, they think it's a very efficient way to get rid of their enemies. And they realize like, wow, this is going to cause a global problem of like, these white European countries are now going to see us inferior because our enemies are now their slaves, but they don't know the difference between, a Black person from this tribe versus this tribe. So I feel like it did a good job of like opening up perspectives for like these African tribes because they weren't forced to, or they couldn't even think of that perspective ahead of time. So I thought that was really interesting just to see how all the trade network kind of worked in that regard.
Yeah. Rob, you feel the same?
Yeah, I do. It's just, from way back when they've been trying to, come in there and divide and conquer basically. And they're still doing it to this day with, Africa has a lot of natural resources that the world, seeks out. So the best way to do it is to like make one tribe jealous by giving them stuff or giving them weapons, stuff like that, and making them hate each other. It's the same stuff. It's slave trade, natural resources like oil, diamonds, and stuff like that. It's all still happening. So.
Yeah, I think, and that's what was interesting to me because I know we had spoke on this a little bit, but there was some backlash for this movie that I was kind of bummed to see initially because I was hanging out up in the mountains and I was just scrolling on Twitter and one of the headlines was "Boycott the Woman King," and I was like, oh man, I was really looking forward to watching this movie, but then I clicked on it and I was like, oh okay, like and they were all talking about that this movie, kind of brushes over a lot of this stuff. I can't believe that they're hiding this part of history. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go see it for myself, judge it for myself, see how that goes. And I thought it was awesome. Like the movie itself, I thought was great. And I thought it was a really great glimpse into this because you can't tell a story the way that this actually happened because that's not a movie. Like that's just a documentary and it would be a really sad documentary. So what I learned when I was doing research on, so the Dahomey tribe was around starting in like the early 17th century. So like around the 1600s, and they lasted until around 1904. So if you think about it in that perspective, we're getting a glimpse through this movie of kind of the dying days of this tribe. Obviously, it sounds like they had maybe about 80 more years to go. But in the way that the history was, this was their livelihood. They traded slaves. That was all that they did. And they did it for all of their supplies, which, again, I kind of talked about in earlier, but is interesting because there was even a moment, and it said in here, that they were kind of trying to convince this king, and it's the king that they show in the movie. Oh, well, we could sell other things like palm oil instead, and that's a big piece of the film too. Is Viola Davis's character, get her name right, Naniska, she is trying to convince him, like, we need to stop doing this. These are our people, which I thought was a really powerful message, that like the head of the military essentially is saying this. I wouldn't have expected it to come from her, but he's like, okay, yeah, you know what? She shows him the palm, like, desert basically of all of these different, palm trees they're working on. And he's like, we'll give it a shot. And so, in the movie, when it ends, you're like, okay, cool. So, they kind of solved the problem. But when you read the history, they tried that and then immediately went back to doing the slave trade very quickly afterwards, just because it was more lucrative. And so, I'm not here to certainly pass any judgment on an ancient tribe that I know no one from, but I just found it very interesting, because one of the pieces of it was Britain and Europe, basically the empire, tried to stop them from doing that, because they were getting to this point in the late 1800s where everyone was trying to abolish slavery, especially in Europe. And so these guys, at least the way that I read it, I interpreted it as they were like, hey, like, we still have more people, come buy them from us. And everyone was like, dude, no, like, we're done doing that. That's not okay anymore. And so they actually kind of canceled them in a sense. And that's what the downfall was of their tribe, because they weren't able to get a lot of other income, which is just a bummer, because they were a coastal, it's like up on the coast. So there's a lot of resources they probably could have offered, but it was one of those things where it's weird to say it this way, but like the slave trade went out of style in that area. And so people didn't want to associate with it anymore. And they weren't smart enough to try and use some other thing to get them money. So really fascinating in that regard. And again, you don't get to see that in this movie, because that's really depressing to watch. And so you're kind of watching in this very small window between that moment of like, okay, maybe there's some hope they're going to be able to change their ways, which I liked. It worked for me when I was watching it. I was like, okay, this is really cool, just to see how they reckon with it as well. Both her as the woman king, but then also him, which was John Boyega, who I thought did an awesome job as the king, of him having to reckon with it, because it sounded like his brother was big on it and he was making it sound like he wasn't as much. But again, in reality, he was the one who was doing it. But very interesting.
Yeah, I have some thoughts there, because at first I went in without seeing the Boycott the Woman King, and I knew the history like afterward, like after I saw the film. Like, when I say after, I mean today. And when we were chatting about it in our chat. So I think I can't help but feel like I see where the criticisms lie, because if that, I mean, like you said, it's like they stopped the movie before all the bad stuff happened. And I agree, like the story they told was very empowering for a lot of reasons that go outside of like the actual historical moment. But I think that there was an opportunity for them, like a lot of biopics. I even think of that one, something set. Oh my gosh, that movie, the court movie about like all the people that were. I'm blanking on the name.
Trial of Chicago 7.
Trial of Chicago 7. So like at the end, they said like where everyone ended up and like the like the real history. I think there's an opportunity to do something like that at the end, because it is kind of like a big deal. Like you ended like, okay, they're going to focus on natural resources and not like selling their own people, but that's not really what happened. So I just felt like, I mean, obviously you want to end it on a high note. We see Viola be like crowned as king. I just wish that they would have acknowledged it at the end, especially since a lot of the marketing is around real historical events. Like really, it's not even just saying like inspired. It's saying, these are historical moments. And this was even in Viola Davis's interviews. So I do think that it could have been better at like managing those expectations. But what we got, I think, is an empowering story. And I can't be mad at it, but I do expect more now that I'm educated on the history.
And that's a good point. That was a piece that I was I felt that exact same way, because as the movie was slowly ending, again, I didn't know how it was going to end, but I was like, oh, I kept thinking to myself, I can't wait till like, what's it going to say? What's the crawl at the end going to say? because you know at the beginning it kind of has that crawl, and I was assuming, like you did with a biopic, that there'll be this is what happened to the queen, this is what happened to the king, yada yada yada, and it just ended. And I didn't think of it at the time. I was just like, oh, okay, cool. That was great. But now that you mention it, you're right. There should have been something. And it could have been, it wouldn't have been a nice thing, right? It would have been like, well, shortly after this, they went back to the slave trip. But it would have at least provided a little bit of background, a little bit of acknowledgement. But I think beyond that, the movie did what a lot of movies have been too afraid to do for a very long time. So it's like, at the same time, they're taking some pretty big steps, I think, because I can't remember the last time we saw a mainstream movie with almost an entire Black cast about Black history that's not based in America. I thought that was really cool. So to me, it's like, this is kind of the same as like the Eternals in a sense, where this movie hopefully is kicking the door in, and then we start seeing some more films that maybe dive a little darker into that backstory of what's going on. Rob, did you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I respect everybody's opinion, and I respect, the people that boycotted it. Yeah, they have good reason to do it. But this story is about the ascension of the general to the woman king. So, yeah, it would have been nice to have that, because I'm sure a lot of people aren't read up on this history, but if we're focusing on just what happened in the movie, then that's what it's about. It's about, Viola Davis's character basically become the title is Woman King. That's how she became the Woman King, basically. So I'm okay with it. I get it. I read about the history a little bit before the movie, but that didn't stop me from watching it. But that's what it was about. Because there's plenty of other biopics and historical movies that leave a lot of stuff out. So, this ain't
the first time that someone left something out of a biopic.
Yeah, and to say boycott is so aggressive, because it's like, this is the first time we got this type of representation, and for like. There's just so many different layers to that. And I remember all of the critique about the Harriet Tubman film.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Like, people were literally like, boycott the movie just because she was, Cynthia Erivo is, she's from England. She's British. And that's why people were boycotting it, because it should have been like a Black American actress. And I'm just like, come on, like, that's not the hill to die on. So
right, if that was the hill to die on, no one would have gone to see Doctor Strange because of the Ancient One not being cast as an Asian character.
Right. So, I mean, I just feel like if truly boycotting this film for that will that will just really hurt these types of movies in the future. So, I like that it's being addressed, but boycotting feels a bit extreme.
And the good news is the boycott didn't work, because the movie did really well. The projections for it were around 14 million, and it made 19 million. So it actually exceeded expectations, which is great. I mean, we have an actual huge scale action movie in theaters that you can go watch and be really entertained by and learn a little bit. So I think people saw that and kind of gravitated to it. What were you going to say, Rob?
No, I mean, if anything, it's just inspiring people to do more research. Like that's the the win-win part of this whole thing. Like, yeah, you want people to boycott it. Maybe that got other people interested to either go watch the movie or learn more about the Dahomey tribe and all this stuff. So, okay,
yeah, that's a great call. I mean, I certainly did. Afterwards, I was like, I gotta see what of this, because and I thought that like some of this I know is not going to be true. So like, I want to look up and see what parts of it were true, what parts of it, where'd they pull this stuff from. So it was really cool that they kind of translated it really well. So we'll go over the cast real quick and talk about kind of our thoughts on some of these characters. So we talked a little bit about John Boyega as King Gezo, actual character. If you look on Wikipedia, there's actually a drawing of this king wearing a really fancy, he's got almost like an umbrella that is attached to a backpack sort of thing, like so that the sun wouldn't be in his eyes, I guess was the painting they did of him. But all of that was accurate. He had a brother, though in real life, he kind of conspired to kill his brother versus it being the way that it was. So he was kind of a questionable king. But I thought Boyega did a really good job as the king. He gave off this really confident vibe while at the same time kind of acknowledging that he's like, in a sense, sort of the dumbest guy in the room when it comes to Viola Davis, which I really liked that. Like the whole... he's got his own opinion, and then one of his wives is like, no, it should be this way, and he's like, yeah, okay, maybe, and then he goes to talk to Viola, and he's like, yeah, we're gonna be doing that. And I'm just like, yeah, you're going to be doing that, man. Like, it's Viola Davis. There was a great scene too, if you remember, where she's there, like all of the women are kind of his little harem is gathered there, and she walks in and she's like covered in blood and walks off, and they're like, how is she getting away with this, like walking in the king's thing or whatnot? And they're like, you just got here. She like saved his life like years ago. She can do whatever she wants. And I was just like, that is awesome.
Yeah, I think John Boyega, he did such a good job, and I think it's funny. I mean, we joked about him like looking like Prince, but it's almost like reverse. Like, a lot of like the royal, like a traditional royal family from like what we know, it's like the woman, the queen, is just there to look nice. I believe that was the king in this instance.
Right.
Like, he was there to look nice. I mean, he made decisions, but he was all happy about getting like some of the like the European trade, like the silks and like all the new like fashion and things like that. So I thought it was just hilarious to just see how they position his character.
He would have been an interesting Mive guy.
Right.
Starting the OG Mive down in Dahomey. Yeah. Yeah. So
like
he
the
was
man
great.
Queen, basically. That's him.
Yeah.
the man queen, is that what you said?
Yeah.
That's going to be the sequel, and that's where we'll actually get that very dark explanation of what's been happening. In the man queen. You guys heard it here first. If that gets greenlit, you know where that receipt lies. So okay, we'll talk about the one other man, and then we're going to go to all the wonderful women that were in this. The other man is Jimmy Odukoya, who plays Oba Ade, who was the general of the Oyo tribe, I think is what it was. The basically like the bad guy tribe. I mean, we only see them we see a little bit of them. They feel almost like a menacing presence more than they're actually menacing. Like, everyone always talks about them in whispers, but when they show up, the team just destroys them, and it's like, okay,
right.
Cool. But he did a great job as an actor. I was terrified of him just because of all the way that they cut the editing of them cutting in the flashbacks of when she was raped by him was insane. Like, how it was just very quick glimpses, and so you kind of have to put it together, but it's very easy to do so. But then when you see him, you feel like that scene where she confronts him the first time and she realizes it's him. She like sees his earpiece. I got chills when I was watching that, because I was just like, what a traumatic experience in that day and age, right? Like, she never got to go to therapy. She never got to see anybody, like to have a talk with anyone, especially due to the situation that it was, which we'll talk about soon. I just thought he was perfect for what he was. Again, he wasn't like some grand role to play, but in a way he was, because he was kind of the driving force, and she talks about it at the end, of kind of becoming a different person because of him, how she hid herself inside of herself, which was powerful in its own right. But Rob, we'll start with you. What'd you think of this general?
I like the cast top to bottom, man. Like, yeah, like you said, he is a presence. He was real menacing, like a lot of his stuff was like short and sweet. He didn't have a lot of lines, but like just like the presence, the fighting styles and everything. Yeah, I think he did a good job.
Yeah. Maya, same to you. Any other thoughts?
I think he did a good job. I mean, I think I like the fact that it was more so, it wasn't like you said his current state that made him menacing. It was more so his past, and linking him with her trauma made him menacing. So I really liked how they kind of layered on that to make him be more of a bad guy. It wasn't just him because he was getting his ass whooped every single time he was on the screen, and his men. So I liked it.
He got a couple good licks in though at some points, I think, before they had to run off. Man, we'll have to break down the action scenes, because that second scene, or the scene where they're at his place of business at the port, and she, Naue comes out and saves her because she doesn't come back. Like, that whole bit was so good. But yeah, let's dive into the true stars of this show. So we'll start at top billing. We got Viola Davis as Nanisca. Just was absolutely incredible. I will not be surprised if she shows up in the Oscar runnings for Best Actress, just because really anything that she does usually gets her a nomination, but she definitely earned it in this. Especially, I think she earned it actually more in the quiet scenes, but I feel like she should win because of the action scenes, of like the fact that she was able to pull off that very quiet, sensitive side when she's talking with Amenza or with Nawe. Especially like those scenes in the bathhouse or the bathing area, basically. But then just the raw action that she has, those fight scenes, the choreography of all of it, I thought she just did an absolutely phenomenal job. And this whole story, which again we'll dive into here shortly, was just with her and her daughter, was absolutely beautiful. Maya, thoughts?
Yeah, she killed it. I mean, but she kills everything minus that First Lady series. We're not going to talk about that. But she literally just blew me away. I really, like you said, like the more quiet scenes where she's kind of just dealing with her trauma, I think were really powerful. And I love because a lot of films just showcase, like, the strong woman, and they just make her strong 24/7. So like the fact that we can see those more vulnerable moments through her character, and honestly through her character we also saw that, like, having a warrior, not having children, like committing to yourself, she's the top dog and she has a daughter, so I loved how they created this system for the Agoji soldiers on how to be best soldier, but it's like, look at the number one woman, and her story is even different. So I love the fact that, like, through her character, they're able to show like difference. You don't have to be an Agoji just one way. Like, your trauma, your life experiences is what makes you unique, who you are. So I really love that with her character.
Rob, what do you think of Viola?
She's always A+, man. So I'll see what she does with this fight training in like a Suicide Squad sequel or something.
Ooh, yeah, she Amanda against the world. Yeah, that would be awesome, man. That you point that out, Maya, too. I think that was something that I was thinking of when I was watching it, just because, again, you see these tribes or it doesn't really matter what culture it is, but it's like these self-imposed rules that they give themselves that are based off of like who they are today, and like I'm just sitting there going like, why would you limit yourself like that? Like, but at the same time, I was like, I could see where back in the day, like, oh, our best warriors, they're completely pure, they have no children, like they don't have kids, kind of like the Black Widow program. It's like kind of makes sense. But then when we, it's all the reveals happen, I'm like, so what are they gonna do? Kick her out now because she's, she didn't follow the rule? And obviously they don't, but I'm just like, that's that interesting line that you have to deal with in those cultures, because it's like, so what are you gonna do? Like, obviously, if this had been like Amenza who had a kid, yeah, we would have kicked her out. But it's like, it's the woman king. What are you gonna do about it? Like, at this point, the rules are probably gonna get changed, and now you can have kids. If you want to, but man, and it's like that was the perfect way of doing it, because any other movie that would have been like of course she's got a secret kid, blah blah blah. Like, all of those pieces tied in together so nicely, and you're completely taken off guard. So let's talk about Nawi, because I hope I pronounced her name right, but is it Tuso Mbidu? First role. Did I say it right?
Well, yeah, I literally watched an interview with her and Trevor Noah just so I can get, but I think close. I think what you said is
okay. Yeah, Tuso Mbidu. She was amazing, especially again when you look at that as like, I think this was her first big role, which was huge. But the range of emotions that she gives and the journey that we take with her, I can't remember the last time I was so enthralled in a person as I watched them. And then when you constantly get these twists to where, okay, you get a very traumatic scene where her dad is trying to sell her to a man to marry her off so that he can get money, because she's being obstinate, which I was just like, again, that whole toxic culture that still kind of persists sometimes today. It certainly isn't as bad where people aren't selling off their kid who's talking back to their parent, but it's like, man, if you had a voice back then, you were in trouble. And so then she defies that guy, and he's like, that's it, I'm just going to give you to the king. And I was like, interesting. Okay. Because I don't think that's going to go the way you think it is. And it doesn't, right? She gets taken in and she's trained, and she decides that she wants to become the absolute best, which I thought was it's an amazing message anyway, right? Of, whatever situation you're in, making the best of it and being the best. But then when it's shown, how much Naniska hates her, in a sense, like gets annoyed with her, gets mad at her, and then you think back to like, but that's because it's her mom. Like and you have no idea that it's her mom. And you get that whole bit where she's talking about, oh, I've got a little scar on my shoulder. And she like looks at it like, what? And I was like, oh no. Like the way that the story just weaved that all together, I had no idea that it was coming. That was probably one of the biggest twists I've seen in a long time in a movie. And it hit me. I had some tears come out because I was just so moved by it.
Yeah, same. This is my favorite performance of the whole movie. I love Viola, love Lashana, but she's gonna be a star. She did that, like so many different dimensions too, because it almost kind of like a Mulan origin story coming from like, kind of desperate means, now like trying to train and improve herself and realize things about her make her unique and a better warrior than some of the other women. So I love the fact that we saw her, even though she's trying to train, there's a lot of things about not being an individual, not always doing your own thing, but then that were great that she learned through being a Goji soldier, but then like being able to also commit to her individuality, her skills, her strengths that made her different. Like Viola would have been dead within the first 20 minutes of the film if she didn't save her. So like there's like different things that they show through her character that like, okay, like being able to be in touch with your innate skills and abilities is also very powerful. And I love the little romance. I know you said we're only going to talk about two guys.
Oh yeah, and I forgot he wasn't listed on the thing. I forgot about him.
Yeah. Malik. I thought that was nice too, because it showed that, as a good soldier, you can still love, you can still whatever, outside of the rules of the Goji. So I think she's the standout in my eyes, and I just hope that there's a second part of this movie in some capacity, whether it be a series or movie.
Yeah. Rob, did you like her that much too?
Oh, she did the damn thing. I didn't know that was her first time, like her first big role. So I'm very impressed hearing that.
She's gonna be a star.
I think the only other thing she's really been in is she's in the Underground Railroad series that's on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of other TV series roles, it looks like. Maybe actually foreign stuff too, from possibly African shows, which is actually kind of cool. Okay, now, and since you mentioned it, so his name was Jordan Bolger, and I was like, I feel like oh, great. Okay, Rob, you're going to dig this. So, okay, so he was in Tom and Jerry, which I only saw a couple minutes of. I had to turn it off. That was bad. But he's also in the Book of Boba Fett, as it says Scad, who I think is one of the tech guys, right? The mod guys.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I think so, but he reminded me of Jack Sparrow. He's like the Brazil. He's like the. He's
got
basically
to do with the eye, is he?
The what? Yeah, I think he's the guy with the eye, with the modded eye.
God, that's terrible.
I know. This is his best role so far, but he's getting there. Still some work to do. There's a little bit of. I like this, and I think this. And again, I was looking at some of the kind of history behind the movie. They said that so it's like him and his buddy named, I think his name was Santo. Who is they're both from Brazil. And so Santo is a slave trader. And this guy is half Dahomey. His mom was traded as a slave to someone in Brazil. They had a kid. And so that's him. And so his mom's last dying wish was for him to go to the tribe, to just see it for himself, to see where he came from. I loved that whole concept, that whole conversation he had with the king, where he's like, give my regards to your mom. He's like, I just buried her. And I was just like, dang. And he's like, well, this is your home now. I loved that. And it was really cool to see how anti-slavery he was, even though he's kind of hanging out with this slaver. And so I feel like his lens was what the movie makers were trying to push, that whole, anti-slavery idea was through him, of like, see, there's like people back then who weren't really big fans of slavery. And he has that whole big bit at the end where he helps out the group escape, and his friend, gets his friend killed. So there's a kind of a cool trajectory there. But I also loved that he was really nice to Naoe. Like, you know, they never made it seem like he wasn't going to be, but she was always very reticent to be around him. Right. Like there's that bit where she's in the house and she's like, why are you've locked me in here? And he's like, here's the key. You can unlock it whenever you want, sort of thing. Like I liked that about him a lot, but then she was comfortable enough to be like, hey, we got to go our separate ways. And he was cool with it too. So that was nice.
Right. Yeah, I think it was, like you said, it's a good way to show like those two identities, like how he coped with it. And like just because you were conditioned to be, you know, uphold these ideas of slavery doesn't mean you had to continue that way. So it was a great break in the road. And I love the scene with Naui when she had to leave and she had to put on like the undergarments of like a, you know, traditional whatever garment too. I thought that was another good way to show like how she was different and didn't mind like deviating from the other soldiers.
And that bit where he's like, I don't have anything to give you. And she just grabs a sword. And I was like, nice.
Yeah.
Just take that. Rob, we'll go down to you on this one. So we've got Lashana Lynch playing Izogi, who I thought she was phenomenal. What did you make of her?
I loved her in this. She's very charismatic. She's kind of like got the comedy relief and everything, and like no nonsense. Like the whole package rolled up into one, you know. Like, and she showed a lot of range in this movie. Oh
yeah, especially there was, I think, was she the one that had the scene? I can't remember what the words were, but there was a scene where she's explaining someone. It's either her or Naneska who's explaining something, and there's like there's a moment where they pause. And then like the impact happens or whatever it was. They're saying something like it's during one of the rituals or something, but I was just like, man, she is so good. She's got that fight with the guy with the spear where it's like, who's going to grab? I think the way I love they didn't even say what the rule was, but to me, it seemed like whoever grabs the spear first loses because you're grabbing it to like instinctively take it out of you. And oh man, when she won and just was like, let's go. And then afterwards, Nawe was like, I want to be like her when I grow up. Like I thought that was her relationship with Nawe too. That whole thing was just so meaningful. I loved that. That was probably, honestly, I may have even liked that as much as her and her mom. Like I thought that, and when she ends up getting shot, I did not believe that happened. I was so mad because I was like, dude, you say that you're anti-slavery, but it takes you 10 minutes to come pull a guy off of her. Like literally she gets shot, falls down, and then Malik shows up and pulls the guy off. I'm like, dude, if you'd have just been there 2 minutes earlier, we'd have been fine. But
it's like a Star-Lord type of thing. Like, no.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Did you like Lashana as well, Maya?
I loved her. Yeah, I think she was really great. I was funny when she was talking about like her history, like how she got there, and I forget it was like some traumatic thing with her. Oh yeah, her mother was basically like prostituting her out, basically selling her virginity, all this horrific stuff that happened. And so it's like when you think of the Goji as soldiers, there's so many women coming from different backgrounds, and so like someone like her who wanted more structure, who wanted that like being told what to do, is very different from Naui, where, you know, she had like this own sense of individualism, where I love that Zogi, it was like different because it was kind of through like a need. So I really liked how they explored that. But yeah, like you said, it was really tough to see her die. And then the scene where she was very defeated, like when she was like, she was caught. And then she was like, it was Naui who had to like convince her to like, no, we can escape. So it's almost like it was so her mind was so templatized with, oh, you have to be strong, Okay, I'm captured, I'm not strong anymore. She didn't know what to do. So I think that was a good way to show that, you know, didn't matter what circumstances, like you need to like, you know, lift yourself up. You can do it. Have this confidence. It's not just being associated with the rest of the soldiers. You're a soldier even by yourself.
Yeah, I think that there's a really good message there too, because it really, I think it probably spoke to a lot of those slaves too at the time of that idea of like, the minute that you got thrown in that cage, it was done. You're over with. And that was the point, right? If you can dehumanize somebody to that point, put them in a cage, put them in shackles, they're going to be defeated. But in reality, they're not yet defeated. There's still things that they could do. And it was so cool for her to be the one to share that with her, because in the beginning, she was the one that shared that with her of like, it's going to be okay. You know, rule number one, do everything that I'm going to like, do everything that I say. I thought was great. And then, oh man, just the minute where she's like, she pauses, then she looks up and she's like, you need to correct my arm. And I was just like, oh no. And it was so messed up, but she's just boom, right away. She's like, okay, we're going to do this, 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 and this. Like just that idea of like the minute that you realize that you're not confined to your situation the way that you think you are, and your mind just opens up with possibilities. She did such a good job of showing that. And I think it spread to a lot of the other people that were in there too, because they started being like, okay, yeah, let's do it. Let's do this. I'm getting chills just talking about it. I forgot about that. That scene was so good. Okay, we've got one other person too in the main squad, which is Sheila Atim, Sarah herself from Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I got to tell you, I was semi-impressed with her in that because we got two very short scenes with her. I feel like I've seen her in one other thing, and I'll double check on that.
Did you watch that Halle Berry film on Netflix when she was the boxer? She was in that.
Is that Bruised? I'm seeing on
here. Bruised. Yeah,
I have not seen that. She was in Pinocchio, though. Did you see that? It said she was Signora Vitelli. If that rings any bells. Why? You said you watched that movie twice.
I did, but I do not remember her.
Must be a very, very. She's also in the Underground Railroad as well. I'm gonna have to check that show out. There has to be something else that she was in that I saw. I'll look on my phone. But seeing her in this made me pretty sad because I was like, I guess we're never going to get to see these acting chops in Marvel since they killed her character off in Doctor Strange. Yeah, she was so good in this movie. Like, I was just like, man, Marvel made a really big mistake getting rid of her. But maybe that means they recast her as something else, kind of like Gemma Chan. I thought she was amazing. She was literally from Pinocchio. She was the Jiminy Cricket to Nanesca. I felt like, like anytime something was going on, she would. I loved that scene where she's like, I didn't want to say this in front of the group, but you literally just did what you said you weren't going to do. And that goes to that scene. So for those of you listening that haven't seen it or did see it, the amazing scene that the whole army shows up at the port to go fight. The plan is that they're just going to free a couple of people and then leave. But then Nanesca stays to fight this guy, and there's a whole group of people coming. And Nawe runs to cut this rope that blocks them all in to sort of protect her. But then when they're done, she gets mad at Nawe. She's like, no, you did not follow orders. You went off on your own. And as I'm watching, looking, I'm like, you're literally describing what you just did because you've got, the anger in your mind. And so to see her share that with her, I thought was nice. The whole bit about reading the seeds, I thought was really cool as well. Talking about, and I was thinking about that the entire movie when she's like, okay, I had this dream where I'm seeing this. It was like seeing a tiger in the distance, and she's like, somebody from your past. And she's like, you're going to have to be more specific than that. But then she comes back and she's like, those seeds were right, or something like that. Like,
the general shows up literally like right after that.
Yeah. Yep. And yeah, she's like, is everything okay? And she's like, your seeds were right. Going back to Viola, she just did such a good job of having like that quiet desperation where she needs to release these emotions, but she can't do it around anybody else. She's got to go do it alone. And then every time she goes to do it, though, she comes in. Amenza comes in somehow, and she's like, "What's up? What's going on?" And so she really did kind of feel like a confidant. Rob, what'd you think about her?
I thought she was great, man. She's like the the voice of reason for Viola's character. Like she's the one helping her fight her demons. I guess she talked about the whole movie, like the whole reason she was going after Daryl in the first place and like broke protocols because of her internal struggles and her trauma. So I thought her character was great. Like you said, I wish they didn't kill her off in Doctor Strange. But, multiverse scenario might get her back somehow.
That's true. Maybe they pull him from someone else. Hey, if you could too, Rob, check your volume a little bit. I was having a hard time hearing you. I could barely hear you. Maya, what about you? What'd you think of Amenza?
I thought she was great. Like, I mean, that was a really good analogy, like Jiminy Cricket. But she was the teacher. She's like when all the kids were walking, she was the teacher. That's some very minor role. So,
Oh, okay,
but
okay.
yeah, it's but no, I thought she was great, and I mean, like everyone, I feel like she just fit perfectly. It's like everyone had a very specific theme that they wanted to champion for each of the characters, and I think like you said, voice of reason, like constantly like encouraging characters to reflect really came through her. So I really liked that. She was like very much a motherly figure.
And in a weird way, a motherly figure to Nanesca in a
Right.
sense, which I thought that was really cool. And she had, I can't remember exactly, excuse me, what her backstory was, but I know hers was interesting as well. It was like, oh wow, like like you were saying, everyone kind of came. That was the beauty of this group, is like, especially in that opening scene where they just brought everybody in and they're like, this is your new life. Like, you're going to be training to be a fighter. And if you don't want to, you're free to leave. And I was like, oh, the way she paused before she said it, I was like, are they going to kill anyone who tries to leave? But there are people that were that left. And I was like, oh, okay. You know what? Good for them for being like, you know what? You don't want this life. There's another character played by, I think it was Jamie Lawson, named Shantae, who was the other girl. She had the red braids at the time when it began.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that bit where where Nawe like turned to both of her sides, and the one girl was like, I don't want to be here. And she was like, why are you here then? And she's like, because I have nowhere else to go. And then she turns to her and says, you know, why are you here? And she's like, I'm tired. I want to be the one doing the hunting. I'm tired of being hunted. And I was like, oh, okay. And then she's like badass the entire rest of the movie. Like that end test where they're going through it. Oh my gosh, that bit where after they get through the thorns and she's like beating her going down the thing and she just jumps and goes down was just like, oh my gosh. And I love that, like, she got super upset when she lost, but then right after all that was over, they hugged each other and they were super happy. So it's like just seeing that competitive edge and I don't know, I loved that. I thought that was really cool.
It was so Mulan. It was so
Yes,
Mulan.
yes.
Yeah, and I love that too because through her character, because I remember she was captured, so they kind of had like the whole like, you're not from here, you're like the refugee type of angle with her character, I believe. And there was like another more senior woman, a Doji soldier, who was like making fun of her, and then that character literally saved her, and like she died as a soldier like any other one. So I thought that was a good theme that they showed. Doesn't matter where you come from, you're here, we're fighting together. It was really beautiful.
Yeah, that I loved that message, and it was, the delivery was a tiny bit corny just because she was like sitting there minding her own business, and both of them got up, and she just turns right to her, and she's like, "You have no business being here. You're not welcome." Blah blah blah.
Right.
And Amenza's like, "Hold on, let me explain to you why you're wrong." And I was like, "Okay," but it needed to be said because I think it was an important piece, like you said, and it really did come full circle, man. When Shantae was in the field towards the end, and she's got the gun, and she like pops off on two people and then shoots that giant thing that explodes all the other people. And she looks at the girl and they like give each other a nod. And then she stands up and it turns out she got shot too, which was a huge bummer. But man, it's just like Marvel. They gave everyone like a fighting moment too. And Amenza was perfect. She had the spear, which was great. Lashana had just the animosity of she was like an animal just running around destroying everyone. Was, oh man, that action was incredible. So I got to ask both of you. We talked about this as we got through, and Rob, we'll start with you on this. Was it the Agoge?
Agoji.
Yeah,
The Agoji versus the Dora Milaje. Who's coming out on top? And this is prime Agoji. So you've got Amenza, you've got Izogi, no one's dead, full team.
Man, that's a tough call, but I guess I'll go with Dora Milaje on this one. I mean, I like them both, but if I had to pick a side, yeah.
Yeah, okay, Maya, what do you think?
Yeah, that was my answer. I'm sorry, dude. Dora. I mean, even if you take Vibranium away from it, I just feel like Dora Milaje seems to have a little bit more choice in their lifestyle, and they're also not plagued by the patriarchy as much as even though they're soldiers, there's still this very kind of different environment than the Dora Milaje are. So I feel like it allows them to be more, I don't know, better, in my opinion. That's my theory.
And I'm thinking that too. And all I'm thinking, my first thought was that they're definitely more coordinated than the Agoge are, just because I'm thinking of those scenes where they would all, you know, a hand clap and all of them would line up into specific spots.
Yeah.
These guys did not do that. But there was that bit where one of them had Nawe stay still while she was like on her knees and used her back to jump up, which felt very Dora Milaje. But even so, yeah, they're from an advanced civilization versus these guys being not from an advanced civilization. So my money would be on the Dora as well. But I would pay to see that fight. I'd go front row to see that fight. Oh man, that would be great, and it would work. I don't think none of those people are in the Dora Milaje. So, credit to them for casting some more people as well. But yeah, so Maya, any final thoughts on the movie before we start wrapping up?
No, I guess. I just wanted to say that I love that, and I saw John Boyega's interview that he did on the red carpet for the premiere. It's like seeing more dark-skinned women. I think when I on center stage, and granted, I would say, and like a lot of these women have, unfortunately, dark-skinned women have been, mainly for historical pieces as slaves, as a lot of the characters, as more masculine, more kind of like typecasted in a way. So like just to be able to not only see the same old, like the fact that Lupita wasn't in this was great, because I feel like they tap her for any sort of historical Black film. So just like to be able to use this to launch other dark-skinned Black women's careers was amazing. And it's just amazing. It wasn't on the nose too, like, oh, we're trying to make a statement by having an all Black female cast. Like, it worked. And it wasn't like, it just felt like you were in the movie, and it wasn't trying to be anything but that. Just a really, really good story. So I loved everything about this. I cannot wait. This is, I'm not really big on like purchasing movies. So I will be definitely buying this if it's not on any other streaming platform.
It's going to be your first disc purchase?
This may be the reason why I actually buy a DVD player.
Well, hopefully not a DVD player. Hopefully you can get at least a Blu-ray player.
Oh yeah, that's what you know what I mean.
I hope The Woman King comes out on VHS. Woo!
Y'all hear the disc knob?
Yeah. Okay.
Both of them.
Rob, what about you?
Oh man, it's an inspiring movie. Like it's refreshing to see, like Maya was talking about, not somebody being typecast, somebody having some power and showing, like real life. It's dark-skinned women aren't just typecast for one specific role. They do so much. There's so much can be done, and all these actresses are phenomenal. So it's good to see them be able to show more talent. Show what kind of real talent they have. So I'm all for it, man.
Yeah. Huge shout out to Lashana Lynch in that regard, because she is killing it. I mean, in a way, she's typecasting herself, but to be Captain Marvel and Maria Rambo and to be
007.
Yeah, she's
like
ultimate action hero.
All the action beats. It's insane.
Real.
She's awesome. And I would also say this director was Gina.
Yeah.
Gina Prince Blythewood.
I would love her to take on like the Wakanda series.
That's a really good
idea.
I'm
just saying.
Yeah,
I just think that was the ultimate resume. The ultimate resume.
She did Love and Basketball.
Yep.
But then she directed The Old Guard, if you've seen that on Netflix, and I really liked that movie. So I would love to see more from her. I think this was great. I did read too in the Wikipedia though, and I was like, oh, of course. The one of the producers, I think her name was Holly. I'm gonna have to double check, or Maria Bello, I believe. She was traveling in. She was traveling in the area, and she like went to some historical site there and was like, this would make a really good movie. And then she's the one that kind of pushed it, which again, it made a really great movie, but I was just like, oh, okay. So, some lady on vacation that was out there and was like, oh, maybe we could make a little money off of this. But it turned out to be absolutely fantastic. And I think hopefully, like you said, hopefully a showcase for a lot of these actors of like, okay, they can do more than this, especially for like, I would think for Sheila Tim, because I don't know what else she's coming into. I swear, I feel like I saw her in something else. I should have been looking that up. But especially for Thuso Mbidu, because give her some more roles right away. And you can even throw her in new action movies. Get her in the MCU, right? We could have her replace Shuri if needed, only if needed.
Only if needed. Yeah, she would be a good pick.
She's awesome.
No, only thing I've seen her in was Doctor Strange. So, hey, I like her though. So this is great. But yeah, overall, like I said, I loved it too. I give this movie a 9 out of 10. This will certainly come up again in my year-end discussion for top movies of the year. Was very happy to sit in the theater for, and it flew by. This movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes long. Did not feel that way. And I can't remember who produced it. I feel like maybe it was Focus Features. So I don't know where it would be coming to stream, but I imagine at some point it will. But that's going to do it for us here, guys. Maya, Robert, thank you both so much for coming on. This was an awesome conversation. I'm glad I learned a little bit more talking with you guys about this as well. So always a good time when we can have you both on.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Comics and Cinema, I'm your host, Alex Klein. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you at the movies.